right, greetings, you goddamned accursed. It's another edition of the Curse of Politics. Here, as always, to put the cuss in discuss, those strategy and comms kingpins, those burgers of the back room, Jenni Byrne and Scott Reid. We have a jam-packed agenda today, so we're going to get right at it. Today on the show, we're going to do a little handicapping of the Conservative leadership candidates. Really looking forward to what Jenni has to say, obviously. In Ontario, Rod Phillips is officially stepping down, making the announcement not by pre-recorded video while vacationing in St. Barts, but via tweet this time. Is this going to be a strategic move for him? Probably not, but we'll talk about the concept of beating a strategic political retreat. Legault is floating a vaccine mandate tax. Has he jumped the shark with this one? And it's confusing. Truckers were exempt, then they were not exempt from proving vaccination status at the border, all in the course of one night. What the hell happened with all that? And what might the political ramifications be for the government? Our cursed clipping this week is Heather Schofield's piece on nuclear energy. And as always, we'll close the show with our weekly Hey Yous. Jenni, Scott, great to see you.
Hey, great to see you too.
That's all? That's all we're going to cover? Well, we're not going to like book club here? We're not going to read like, Martell or something? I mean, Jesus Christ, I've got days and days. It's a fucking snow day here, you know? The kids are looking after themselves. So.
I'm just waiting for Sam to enter this show.
Well, you'll hear him before you see him. I can tell you that much.
Now, for snow day, Scott, with virtual learning, is it an actual snow day or is it a like kids have to like learn? Like it's not a snow day like when we were in school.
Yesterday was a shove it up your ass sideways day. It was an online, potentially asynchronous online learning day, which is like, imagine the shit we put our kids through. Asynchronous online learning. Hey, kids, get out of bed. I got great news. Asynchronous times are going to roll. And then today is just a flat out snow day. I think that so few people really stuck with the day yesterday. So many students and teachers, I think, just loathed what they went through, and parents, that they just said, fuck it. Today's an actual snow day, just like, whatever. So that's great, except, I've got a busy day with work already. And, my kids are just upstairs kind of starting the gas stove on their own and, buckling those. It's no good. I'm a shit parent is what I'm really trying to get at here, is what I'm shit parent. Here.
I'm buried in snow. You guys got a lot of snow? I'm buried in snow, waiting for the snowplow man to come up here. I'm not going anywhere.
Not 1 ounce of fucking snow where I'm at, guys.
Don't. Fucking don't, okay? Snow for 16 hours yesterday out of the 22 that I was awake. I shoveled my yard. I shoveled the next door neighbor's drive. I shoveled the spot that I like to park in front of my house, which is no longer allowed to park there. But lots of shoveling. And I have a cold. I don't have COVID. I have a cold. Okay. Like I have negative multiple times. But then I'm out shoveling.
Tell it to the judge.
Start coughing and people start spraying weed killer in your face. They're like, fucking get away. And no good.
But in the grand scheme of things, Scott, not nearly as bad as normally your other weeks go. Like this seems like pretty mild compared to like other stories.
No, thank you for raising the point, but I'm very happy. My springtime in New York, Bob Dylan collection came. 1980 to 1985. David, there are some tracks on here. The online version you can download from Amazon is not the same. This has got 6 CDs, some killer tracks, a couple of Empire Burlesque outtakes that you are going to dig.
Really?
Lots
How
of
am I going to hear them?
Luke Taylor playing together from the Infidel years.
Well, you're not going to hear that. You're not going to hear them soon because Scott's got the COVID or the cold. Sorry.
No,
I don't have COVID.
Prove it with a PCR test.
I got a cough. I'm not allowed to go in to get a PCR test. It's a long story, but I get pneumonia every goddamn winter. So I've got pneumonia. Just anyway, everything would be better if I was in Miami.
Oh, I guarantee you it would be.
Yeah, that was an invitation to say fuck off, actually.
Well, that's that's probably what Rod Phillips was also thinking when he resigned this week, that everything would be better in Miami. So
or St. Barts.
He left.
Miami may be too low brow for Rod.
Way. What are you, pink flamingos and big flares? Pissed on that. St. Barts with white crisp pants that are creased and steamed. No goddamn way. Who needs Ontario?
But he left the Ontario cabinet today. He left the Ontario cabinet this week. Martin Redcon said he was basically Doug Ford's brain, and now that's gone. He was the Minister of Long-Term Care. He leaves in the middle of a long-term care crisis. He leaves with 5 months to go before an election. He announces it by tweet. What's the story here? This doesn't sound
well,
like
you've forgotten, like David, you've forgotten a big part of Rod's legacy in terms of, we kind of touched on it in terms of, Doug let him back in cabinet. So this is if I was Doug Ford and I was anyone sitting in his office that had done a favor for Rod Phillips to get him back in cabinet after he spent Christmas at St. Bart's, I would be giving a giant fuck you, Rod Phillips, because there was political capital expended by Doug. He didn't have to have him back in cabinet. I know that it ruffled feathers within people of the party, but Doug was like, nope, we're gonna make Rod whole again. We want him back in cabinet. And then to your point, you leave and you don't even leave, like you're not even saying, I'm leaving and I'll just stay on as minister for the next 5 months or less than 5 months until a new government sworn in, Conservative, Liberal, NDP, whatever. You basically say, yeah, I'm leaving in February. And
atrocious,
and
really.
from what I gather, the statement that said he spoke with the premier and with officials prior to doing was slightly inaccurate as well. So it was kind of a, hey, this statement just went out, so I'm going to have to give you a shout right now.
It was odd. It was like he slammed the whiskey glass on the bar and said, piss on it, I'm quitting this minute. So people said, no, buddy, wait, like sleep it off. No, I'm not. Fuck it, I'm gone now. And then off he went. Like it doesn't conform, as Jenny said, to a bunch of, sort of expected conventions. And, like, whatever. I don't begrudge the guy the right to say, you know what, he had been working in politics in his...
Really? The long-term care minister in this circumstance? You don't begrudge it to him?
Well,
like I think David, I don't want to speak for
begrudge him
Scott.
retiring from politics. If he decides, what I'm saying is, I don't begrudge him if he's come to the conclusion, you know what, I had this notion of myself when I was in the late 80s, early 90s, I was going to work my way in business, make some money, then enter politics, become premier or prime minister. Like, I think he was one of those guys that felt that way. That was always the vibe I got off him back in the early 90s and kicking around the Mulroney government and stuff. And I don't begrudge him. He came to the conclusion, look, this St. Bart's, where we're at, it's not happening for me. So fuck it. I'm going, but you got to do it in the right way. And I would think that this burns bridges within the provincial party. And I would think that this, there are responsibilities of office too, as you say, right? Long-term care, it's kind of a file right now, I mean, the provincial government, as far as I can tell, hasn't really paid any attention to it, but, it's a matter of distress and concern to people. So, I don't think it's such a fantastic walk out the door.
Yeah.
So Twitter was full immediately after he did it. Twitter was full of, oh, he's getting out while the getting's good. He sees the polls. He's getting out before the thing happens. All this kind of stuff. Do you see anything in this? A guy that, I mean, normally when people leave governments to preserve their own ambitions, it's governments that are sort of long in the tooth, and you don't want to be around and associated with the end. Not in this circumstance. I mean, is this a move to give him a political future, or is this the end of his political career?
I actually don't I don't know. I've talked to people that think it could be either or. The vast majority of people that I've spoken to in the last week, kind of since it happened though, feel that this is a way for Rod to privately be able to start the conversations going, I was really against all of these lockdown measures. So if whether it's a run federally or provincially, and I'm not even saying for leader, I'm just saying it preserve reputation that way. And I think that if that is the case, it's the opposite of strategic brilliance. Like, there is no way that a guy who sat in cabinet for all but the 5 months that he was kicked out of cabinet for basically locking down, leaving, and then lying about leaving. I don't think there's any way that he'll be able to not say that he wasn't part of a government that did these measures, good or bad, depending on what you think about them. So I don't know what you guys think. I'm waiting. There has to be some kind of job that he's going to have. Like, I'm surprised it hasn't already been announced.
I assume that the timing is dictated by, there was some opportunity that was presented to him that he thought, this is better than the track I'm on. The political play is not going to work out. And I kind of got to say yes to this thing right now. I'm just making that up. I mean, this is all just speculation.
But what job would that be that an employer who obviously thinks you're
where's John Godfrey right now? Where's Paul Godfrey? I mean, where's Paul Godfrey right now? That would be the clue as to where Rod got a job offer.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just trying to sort of reverse engineer whatever
job he gets, one of two things is going to happen. He's a conservative who has a lot of liberal friends. So it's, the Liberals could win, the NDP could win, but there's a good chance Doug's going to win re-election again. And whatever job, let's say he is hired to do, whoever's
better not be GR.
This mythical job we're all talking about and all have in our heads for Rod. If you're someone hiring for that, you're burning a bridge of potentially a 33% chance of who's going to be the next premier. So it's just, the whole thing is just very strange to me.
Well,
I can disagree.
I think in any event, the history I think is pretty clear, and I'm a part of that history, which is when you try to come back when you leave and try to come back and run effectively against the record of the government because it is unpopular and about to be defeated. So you come back and you're the new leader and you're trying to run against the record of the government. It's very, very difficult and unlikely to be successful.
So I think two things. First of all, I think that, with respect to Rod, both in specific terms and then in broad terms, in terms of using him as an example. One, I don't see any evidence that's compelling that this is a strategy, a strategy for future political success. I just don't see that one of the things you must have if you do that, if you're Chrétien, who wasn't in government, but, was in opposition at the time when he walked out of politics, if you're Turner, obviously from the 70s, the Paul situation is a little more complicated. We can come to that. I'm happy to talk about that. But, you have to have a large reservoir of patient support. And by patient, I mean that they will stick with you through that time and that will organize and they'll be there. And I don't see evidence that there's this groundswell or network that's out there. Maybe I'm missing it, but I don't think that that's the case. I would say that, the history, as you say, David, on this idea of I will step away so as not to get, any horse dung on my trousers, and then I will step back in and be the cowboy hero that will ride back up the hill and success. It's very, very unlikely. And I mean, really, if you think about Chrétien did it, but that was a bit of a different rhythm, right? Chrétien was in opposition.
Well, that was opposition. Right? Yeah.
And it's a big difference. So he didn't have to campaign against his own team. And he could become the hope for during that period for those folks. He could become the imagined savior, as opposed to someone that was kind of deciding whether or not they were chincing from the sidelines. It's very difficult. Even you look at conservative examples, and Peter MacKay and stuff. It's not like people talk about it in abstract terms, like, oh yeah, this is a go-to political play. It's not a go-to political play that works over and over. And with respect to Paul, let's be honest, Paul really, really, really was uncertain about whether or not he wanted to step away. He was very reluctant to do that. And it was only because things became so toxic and so it got elevated to a conflict, and people like to joke about got quit. But I mean, the reality is that they did pull the trigger on him. And so, it's a real hard course to plow. And I don't buy that's what's going on.
Yeah, it's hard to run against. It's very hard to run against a government that you're part of. I agree in opposition. This is why if there was if in the next iteration of leadership races, and not to be like, completely esoteric and in the weeds, this is why your buddy Mark Carney running against someone like Chrystia Freeland, if the economy has absolutely tanked, and if we're still looking at prices like the fact that the fact that gas is up over 50% from this year to last year kind of thing. If people are still feeling it, it's a lot easier for someone like him coming in and saying, he can credibly say, I actually wasn't part of this fucking government. Like, what their policies, I wasn't sitting around the table. I wasn't sitting in caucus. I didn't get like a info alert talking point memo as to what I would say if my local weekly newspaper asked about it. I had nothing to do with it.
So, last week I embarked on what's going to be an 8 or 9 part story here. Personally, I like a long story with lots of layers, especially when it ultimately leads to good stuff. If I want more darkness in my life, I'll just rewatch Yellowstone. It's brought to you by our presenting sponsor, TELUS, and if you remember last week's introduction, it's about how we get high-speed 5G wireless connectivity right for the whole country. Not just big urban centers, but all rural and remote areas and Indigenous communities. This is Chapter 1, the Goldilocks opportunity. 5G spectrum are the radio waves that let your cell phone and Wi-Fi transmit data. It's up to 100 times faster than what we currently rely on. And Herle Burleyites, I know you know it doesn't just come to us magically. The government auctions it off to potential carriers like TELUS, and the upcoming auction is the critical step to get high-speed wireless to everyone in all parts of this country. It's for a particular bandwidth of 5G nicknamed Goldilocks. Goldilocks because it's mid-band, not too high, not too low, just right, so that high-speed wireless signals and lots of data can travel long distances. And now you see why it's so critical for rural and Indigenous communities. As I say these words, the feds are holding public consultations on the best way to auction this Goldilocks spectrum to carriers. They want fairness for Canadians, they want service to be universal for Canadians, and they want it to spur real competition amongst carriers, so monopolies don't result and fair prices do. TELUS wants all of these things too. And next week, I'm going to tell you why the key to getting the benefits of Goldilocks to all of Canada is measured in 100 megahertz, as well as how you can have a say in the process. Jenny, I'm just going to pick up on a thread you nicely dropped on the table there, which is leadership races and prospective leadership races. Yeah. So let's just pick up on that.
But there are none, except for the Green Party.
But there are none. But
don't put us for fools. We see you on TV, but this is a different table we're sitting around.
Aaron O'Toole seems to be campaigning pretty hard to keep his job right now after a period of quiet. He's all over social media, waving his arms and ripping the Liberals about everything. Who's he afraid of? Who's looking over his shoulder? If he quit now, what would the lineup look like to replace him?
I listen, I can't speculate on what the lineup would look like. I think there would be a lineup just because if political parties are always going to have people that run, especially when the prize is so big for any of us that have all been in politics. There's a reason we do this, and it's to enact the policies we want to inform government. That's ultimately
and to amass power and glorify ourselves. Don't forget about that.
A little bit of that too. And so
the glory, Scott, the glory. It's all about the glory.
Well, I mean, look at us, David. Jesus Christ, man. I can't buy a drink in this town.
Listen, I think that the Aaron has been out and about. I thought the video on Guibo was very strange because, as I've said before on this podcast, it's lying is a bad personal trait to have. It's deadly in politics, and conservatives don't do cute well. And that video was trying to be cute, but it seems internally, from what I've been hearing from talking to people across the country, is kind of the more that, as time goes on, it's becoming more of a foregone conclusion that Aaron just isn't going to be the leader in the next election. And it's not an emotional, it's Scott, did I say something? Sorry.
I'm sorry, we have to interrupt this podcast for breaking news. Kent Hughes has been named the GM of the Habs.
Huh.
I think we will see Patrick Roy behind the bench then.
Huh?
We can go back to regular scheduled programming. I just wanted to mention that. And we'll pick this up at the end. Sorry.
No. Thank you. I was just wondering why you were flailing. Like, I didn't think I said anything.
Maybe 3 to 4 years from now, we'll have something to talk about as a result of a new general manager.
But it's become, unfortunately for Aaron, it's just become more of a foregone conclusion that he just doesn't stay as leader. It's kind of like loose caucus support that he had 3 months ago, or people in the.
This is breaking news, Jenny. You're saying something very significant.
Yeah.
You are saying something very, very significant. Right
I don't think I am.
You're
I think I've said this.
You are.
I said this though in the fall.
You're a different kind of person to say. You hear this casually, but like you're saying the guy's done for.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big deal.
There's
How's the last chapter unfold? Like, and how long is it? Like, is he gone by April, by June? How does it exactly happen? Does caucus just one day say, listen, we're going to have a meeting and sorry, man, here's your hat, walk the door?
Yeah, I think that's what it'll end up being. I think I think if you look at most leaders, that ultimately is what happened. I don't think it's going to be a Reform Act vote. It's kind of part of the reason why I never supported the Reform Act for a whole host of reasons is if you lose caucus, you lose caucus. It doesn't matter if there's a stand-up vote or you write the name on a ballot, yes or no. Like it doesn't matter. Once a leader loses caucus, they're done. And so I think that the problem for Aaron is he had lost a significant number of caucus after the election. And we talked about, like I said, what I would do if I was sitting across from Aaron O'Toole the week after the election, what I would have told him to do. And he has done none of that. And it's not like he didn't do it for the first month. It's not like he didn't do it for the second month. He didn't do it, like he hasn't done it. He hasn't done it since. And a big part of that is after you lose an election that you campaign in one direction to win a leadership race, then you basically go complete opposite direction. The party holds its nose for the most part because they feel that there's blood in the water with Trudeau and that we have a chance at winning. And then Trudeau comes back with, more seats and, you've basically like floundered during the campaign. The first thing one would have to do is, like, my advice would have been to Aaron O'Toole, here's a beer. Because you're going to need it to wash down the shit that you're going to eat with these 30 caucus members. And that's just your first. I'll bring you a beer for your second round of shit that you have to swallow with caucus, because in this case, the caucus are so important. And I have seen no evidence that Aaron has done any outreach or any significant outreach with caucus. And in fact, he's done the opposite. You've seen somewhat alienating or ignoring people that would have been in the supporter column for him. And then you see him going after people like, Shannon Stubbs, which we talked about a couple months ago, and it floundering. Like you try to go after someone, you try to kill them to make an example, and you lose. Like you lose spectacularly, and it turns on you. And so I just don't see I know I'm saying it kind of casually, but I think I've been here for so long that I don't feel like it's news to me. I just don't think I see zero evidence within the conservative movement that Aaron O'Toole will be our leader in the next election.
Here's something you probably didn't know. The coldest capital city in the world is Ulaanbaatar. Not Ottawa, Ulaanbaatar. But overall, Canada's winter still beats Mongolia's. And this is the coldest month. Some parts of the country are flipping between whiteout blizzards and cold so profound it'll damage your face if you're not careful. It's the season of indoor living. But not for our sponsor, CN. Its trains must keep rolling across the prairies and past Great Lakes and over mountains, and they must roll on time. If they're disrupted, so is the economy. And we already have enough problems in that department. So CN meets Canada's winter head on and deals with it. It's a big job. Severe cold plays nasty games with the physics of steel rolling on steel, especially under thousands of tons of pressure. It makes welded tracks less flexible, and ice crystals effectively attack train wheels, wearing down tread. Deep cold is also the enemy of air brake systems, on which trains rely to slow their massive inertia. Frozen gaskets leak and hoses fail, and if they aren't detected quickly, breakdowns and delays pile up. The solution is rigorous diligence and investment in technology. In winter, CN intensifies examinations of wheels and tracks. Gaskets are constantly changed. Thousands of winter-prepped locomotives capable of increased traction are deployed. Trains are inspected by track sensors and by automated portals as they roll through. Snow melters keep switches and critical junctions clear. CN's scientists strive to provide ultra-accurate weather updates, and automated warning devices ratchet up surveillance of high water levels, avalanches, and landslides. When temperatures drop to severe levels, trains are shortened, which improves braking. There's a lot more to it, but you get the picture. CN's dedicated railroaders can't do anything about the problems overseas that have been choking global supply chains, but they can and do ensure smooth, efficient, rock-solid dependability of the domestic rail shipments we all depend on. As a matter of fact, CN carried record levels of cargo last winter. That didn't happen by accident. I mean, fuck, Scott, if you were mounting a case for him, given his standing in the polls, and given his lack of ability to put any real imprint on what he wants his offering to be intellectually, like he did some political papering over things in the platform, but he hasn't really articulated a different vision of conservatism he doesn't stand for anything, and he's dreadfully unpopular. What is the case for this guy?
Yeah, I think you've actually put your finger on it. That I think the only path available to him would be to go to caucus. And it's almost a stalling technique, but you have to transform that stalling technique into a resurrection. And the stalling technique, I think, would be, guys, this government is vulnerable. If we go through a leadership, right, it's going to give them a chance to breathe. It's going to take some of the pressure off of them. And we actually may find that we put ourselves through some searing debates and ugliness also that might handicap our ability to succeed in the next election. So here's what I owe you.
Guys, you could elect someone worse than me.
Well, but that's, and hey, here's what I owe you as a leader, right? I haven't given you a plan. I haven't given you a plan and a path forward. So I'm going to give you this. This is my program. This is what we're focused on. This is what we're running on. This is going to be the next year of how we rabbit punch this government till it starts coughing blood. And then this is how we position ourselves, who our voter coalition is that we acquire. And I can do that. Not anybody else can do it as well as I can. So give me here's the full plan. This is it. And then at least you put something to people. Right now, it feels like he's just treading water. He's kind of lashing back, sort of very desperately, almost pathetically, sort of going like he's back to true blue social media posts, right? Like it's sort of like it is.
That's sad, Scott. It is sad to watch him.
It's just flailing, literally physically flailing with his arms up and down, like somebody's putting an electric cord up his ass, but flailing. He doesn't stand for anything.
But you're 100. But Scott, you're right. That's the problem he had even in the last election. He doesn't stand for anything. He needs to do his boxes, and figure it out. But I don't know if Scott is like. I actually agree. You and I are actually in perfect agreement in terms of what he should do, and I think you agree in terms of the eating shit with caucus that are out there defending him, and he needs to survive. The problem is what does Erin O'Toole stand for? Even with issues that come up in terms of things like the CBC and today there was another letter about mandate letters that came out. He's had different positions in the last 2 weeks on positions like it's I don't think he can.
He's scared of his own shadow. He doesn't know whether to piss or wind his watch. So he's flailing all over the place. I'll give you another tactic I might try to employ if I were him. I would search about the firmament for established political hands who people respect by and large across the party and try to recruit somebody into my office. I would try to use that sort of feint as a way of saying, and I brought in Jenni Byrne, I brought in David Herle, I brought in, the former mayor of, whatever town to, who to stabilize things. This former MP.
So interesting. Wait, let me stop you, because this is interesting advice. So I think it is the case, Scott, that had Paul decided that he wanted to stay on and remain leader after the 2006 election,
Yes.
that the price that the caucus would have extracted from him for that was getting rid of all of us.
We would have been Romanov.
Right?
Absolutely.
You, me, everybody out the door. New
Marches
people.
to the basement.
You
Bullets.
cannot compare. No, guys.
So
I'm
now
not
you're
gonna let
fighting.
you-
Now you're fighting for a leadership without your own people. Now you
I'm-
bring in strangers to you.
No, I'm not going to allow you guys to compare Paul Martin to Aaron O'Toole to Paul Martin. That is just that there is zero comparison on that. There is zero comparison, and I don't say this as just because we're friends, but like I've gotten to know you guys. I know your campaign abilities. We fought campaigns against each other. You are in no comparison to Paul Martin is not in comparison to Aaron O'Toole. So the difference is you guys, your loyalty is the reason that Paul Martin ended up becoming prime minister. Like it was your loyalty and hard work and what have you. That you can't compare how kind of Aaron became leader and like where he is right now. He became leader by running completely against who he was. He literally falls into the category of a politician who will say whatever he thinks people want to hear to get elected. Like I don't disagree with what he said during the leadership race. We talked about this. My problem was knowing Aaron the way I do. I knew it was all just a lie. So yes, Scott, do I think he could bring people in that would help him with caucus? I think caucus management is a huge thing. I think it's past that point now. And I don't think, like David, I think that if he wanted to put a bullet in anyone, he could have already done that. But I don't think he has anyone around him that's, seen as big enough to actually put a bullet. I think that time has come and gone. Like, I think it's just, but I don't want you to compare 2006 and you guys to like Aaron O'Toole, because there is like zero.
No, it's a very minor. I thank you. I appreciate that, and it is a minor point on which we were drawing a comparison. Let me get back to the handicapping of the Conservatives just for a second. I know we're trying to slide away.
We think the Liberal Party needs 2 scoops of us. Okay, we're fine. We're fine. We're in defiance of history and popular opinion when it comes to where we stand. Okay, but thank you. The gesture was kind.
I want to focus us around 2 questions for the Conservative leadership race. One of which is
there is no leadership race, but go ahead.
Understand. First question is, will there be a PC type candidate in the vein of Peter MacKay representing that wing of the party, and in a serious way? And second of all, how prohibitive a favorite is Poilievre?
Listen, I think there will be, like, whenever there is a race, there will be a race. I don't think the labels internally matter as much as what people outside the party think. It was shockingly very seamless. I can say this as someone that came from the Reform Canadian Alliance side. When we merged the parties in 2003 and 2004, I worked on Harper's leadership campaign in 2004, and then when he won, came into the party, and we were literally starting to work with people that, a year ago we had been working against, and it was very seamless. So I think it's to say, like, PC side of the party versus non-PC side of the party. Like, I don't think those labels mean anything anymore. And I think if we look at the last leadership race, I think that was the fun, like, where people now are like, it doesn't matter, because Aaron and Leslyn wasn't involved in either of the legacy parties, and Aaron and Peter, the 2 front runners, were both people from the PC party, like the PC side of things. Like Aaron O'Toole used to make fun of me back in the day for being a reformer. You're a reformer working on Bay Street now would be kind of what his joke was. So I don't think the labels kind of matter anything at this point.
Okay, so we haven't mentioned PP. Yeah. No, we've been there. Pierre Poilievre, obviously, is the big question mark. He didn't run last time. He was going to run, then he pulled out. Family issues, young family, all that stuff. Family's still relatively young. But he's the obvious that people look at and go, well, he's a guy from the Harper era. You know, he's got a high profile, all that stuff. Obviously, you know, I'm not trying to put you in a super duper awkward spot, although maybe a little bit, Jen. And so that's the first thing, right? So if he runs, is he such a prohibitive front runner that it's very difficult for others? I assume you'll still get the Leslie Lewises of the world. So you're going to have all that ugly, weird shit where it's going to be kind of, you know, like, you know, socially conservative, but then people will have a big dollop of, you know, we mishandled the pandemic, we shouldn't have to make people get vaccinated, all that kind of stuff, and that'll get weird and ugly, and there's a risk that it will alienate conservatives from popular mainstream opinion even more. So you go through all that stuff. I know you don't like to hear that, but I think that's a real risk. The big question I have is what, like, isn't there, I look around that caucus, I don't see a lot of timber. So what else after that? I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but I'm wondering about a name like Tim Houston. You look at that guy and go, now this guy's young. He's well liked in the party federally as well. He's got some roots there. I'm sure he probably isn't not eager to leave his job after he just won it. But like, why wouldn't people be, you know, taking the taxi to him and going, dude, come on, give it a whirl, come on.
And some people find him very cute. A lot of my gay friends call him Daddy Houston. That's their nickname for him. In fact, as we were sitting here,
there's a pretty big gulf. There's a pretty big gulf. I don't know where you guys are going with this, and I'm a little afraid of it. But
we'll just pull back
there's
on
a
the
pretty
game
big gulf, Scott,
no.
between conservatism as it is practiced in Atlantic Canada and conservatism as it is practiced in Western Canada. There's a pretty big gulf. I don't know how interested Western conservatives are going to be in Tim Houston.
I think it would be interesting to have the party have that discussion, wouldn't it?
But I think, listen, I think it also is
the winner.
Everyone has different styles. Higgs in New Brunswick could end up being the only other premier in Canada to actually balance his budget in terms of in New Brunswick, and you know, then we're looking at Kenny and Higgs, who have very different styles. So I think the reason people talk about Pierre, and it's not like it's a secret. I was going to support him. We've talked about it on the pod. If he had run in the last leadership race, I was going to support him. And when he made the decision, him and his wife made the decision that he wasn't going to run, I did a lot of media in terms of talking about that. I think the reason people look at him, like when we were talking about topics for this podcast yesterday, our friend Michael brought up the fact that 1.5 million people have watched just on Twitter alone a speech of Pierre talking about the history of money and it being shared by Bitcoin enthusiasts and traders in the US. And so I think the reason that he is perceived as a front runner is because he just has such a huge share of voice within the conservative movement. I think that there's no one comparable, and that includes premiers, and that includes the current leader of our party. And so that's why I think that's why he is perceived by most as a front runner if he decides to run in whenever a leadership race happens.
And it's true, is it not, that he can pick an electric car up over his head with just nothing but his brute force, and he can hurl that car right straight in to Lake Ontario and say, "Be gone, you woke strategy." So that's got to be appealing. I mean, it's nice to have a so-called strong leader. But if he runs, how many other people run? You'll get the Leslie Loomis types that will, but is that going to clear the track?
Who knows? Honestly, who knows? We'll see more of commentary on this and people. But it's honest when I say no one is talking about. This isn't me spinning you guys. This isn't like we turn off the camera.
Yes, and then I'll be like, O'Toole is a walking dead man. Now he is. But
no one is talking about his replacement because everybody knows we will get one and it will be better. Not all of us.
But surely people must be working. If I thought the leadership was going to come open,
the only chitter chatter that I hear is there's a lot of chitter chatter about Patrick Brown and his recent foray into lockdown and vaccination policies, and so there is chitter chatter among people that he's trying to make a play, but it's People don't know whether it's provincial or whether it's federal, but that is the only, David, I'm being, on my mom, I'm being honest. The only talk of leadership is Aaron O'Toole and then recently Patrick Brown.
One last
Well, that's
question.
so odd because
Just to
people are
just- let's
organizing
just-
for the Liberal leadership race, and Trudeau's likely to out-survive O'Toole.
Just one last thing, and I assume we're going to dispense with this really quickly, but I think it's hard to raise this topic without absolutely driving this nail into the board. Harper's not running. There's no likelihood of Harper coming. People talk about this every time a Conservative leadership discussion happens. Harper, not a 0% chance. He's doing his thing. He's happy doing his thing. He will always be a influential person within our party. He was the founding leader. He was prime minister for 10 years. This week, I'm sure you've seen he did a fundraising appeal for Peter MacKay to help him pay off his debt. So he still is always going to be a force of nature, so to speak, within the party, but he is not running again. Okay.
Well, one guy who probably would have expected to be part of the race whenever it happens would be Jason Kenney, and that is not going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. And I say this as I like Jason. But Jason, if I was Jason, I would work to become the to fall into the vein of Peter Lougheed or Ralph Klein and be a long-serving premier of Alberta, because I think that I don't think that being a federal leader is I just don't see it happening, at least in a very long time.
He's got his work cut out on that front. So
agreed.
That's what makes it so hard for him to consider going federal, I think. But.
All right, we have to go to our first segment. 45 minutes into the show, we're going into our first segment.
It's like snow shoveling.
It's our clipping of the week. This week comes to us from Heather Schofield in the Toronto Star. I'll just read you a couple of quick excerpts. There was an awkward moment in Glasgow at the beginning of November when Justin Trudeau spoke out in favor of using nuclear energy to cut greenhouse gas emissions. Awkward because Stephen Guilbeault, his new environment minister, whom the Prime Minister had paraded around the Global Climate Summit as proof that he was serious about confronting climate change, had said something much vaguer just a day earlier. And if we are going to cut back on fossil fuel consumption, we don't have nearly enough electricity or other clean alternatives to make up for our insatiable hunger for energy. A massive increase in clean electricity is central to meeting the demand. And expanding nuclear power is a key part of the mix. The role of nuclear energy is recognized as fundamental to achieving and sustaining Canada's climate change goals, and the technology is seen as a long-term baseload of electricity supply, said the International Energy Agency. So the question is, where's the Trudeau government going to come down on nuclear? Time is getting short because it's a long-run enterprise to do, and if you were going to be getting into it, you'd be getting into it now. And they seem to have appointed a Minister of the Environment, of Climate Change, who has, dating back to years of activism on the file, being an anti-nuclear advocate ideologically. So, Scott, you chose this as our clipping of the week. What interested you about this?
Well, two things interest me about it. Obviously, the top line debate about nuclear and what's going to go on. You just set it up perfectly, right? And I think the Guilbeault is obviously resistant. I don't know the guy. I'm not sitting around any boardroom tables. I'm not hearing any kind of gossip. I'm looking at Heather's stuff. I think Heather's one of the smartest, most interesting people writing right now. And I think she's put her finger on a real issue. It seems to me inevitable that nuclear has to be an absolute pillar. You just can't get there from here. I mean, first of all, a plan for 2030 is an ambitious plan, like gigantic ambition, like monster ambition, like we're going to undertake the Fellowship of the Rings kind of ambition. And so to do that without nuclear just seems to me to be a non-starter. So I think eventually Guilbeault will be forced to include that in the plan. I don't know if the center makes him do that. I don't know if he's just trying
to leaving Gandalf behind or something.
Yeah, that's right.
No, but Scott, you're 100% right. There is a 0% chance. There's a 0% chance that there can be a transition in terms of energy use in Canada without nuclear. It's as much as like 7% of energy is solar and wind, and maybe someday, probably when we're long gone and dead, there'll be way to have an efficient battery for solar and wind and all this kind of stuff, but it's not happening in our generation. So like all things Trudeau, Guilbeault will have 0% say in this, because there is no chance that the Liberal government cannot move ahead on what any climate change plans they have that does not involve nuclear. And you're already seeing what happens in countries like Germany, who now just in the last 2 weeks took another reactor off the grid, and energy prices are rising yet again. So I think that it's inevitable. It's kind of like all things energy wise with Trudeau. He talks more of the talk than he walks the walk, because if you even look at Guilbeault's and you look at the different mandate letters for him and Wilkinson and others, is that he didn't talk about reducing energy in oil production in Alberta. It talks about maintaining it at the same levels that he has. So kind of the persona of Trudeau in terms of talking about energy and the actual governing of Trudeau are two very different things, which is why I think that it is, to me, it's a no-brainer. Like I thought the article was great, but it's a no-brainer. Nuclear is like it has to be something that the government props up, or government endorses.
When the environmental movement was being formed in the 60s and 70s, a lot of it was galvanized by anti-nuclear sentiment. And that core ideology remains central to the environmental movement. But I don't fucking get it, okay? I don't get it. There's never been an incident at a Canadian nuclear power plant of any kind. And the risk that is associated with what do we do with the waste, which is always the question people ask, what do we do with the waste? I don't discount that. But when you're talking about the risk of climate change, when you're talking about something that we say is irrevocably changing the climate of the planet to make it less livable, I don't understand how you compare the relative risks of something that is conceptually risky but has never caused a problem, such as nuclear waste, with climate change. Like, I don't understand the risk analysis that's going on here by the environmental movement. So I just think it's bullshit.
So just a last beat on this, because obviously we're all in fierce agreement. There's one little obvious kind of thing too that I think is noteworthy that Heather highlights, that I think is also, it's just important to put a spotlight on. Guilbeault's working on this plan, right? He's got a plan for 2030, right? And they say they're putting this together. Well, as Jenni says, like people can easily be skeptical and go like, oh, like another government plan, a particular government plan from this government. I mean, I think this is one that's got to matter, doesn't it? Like this has got to be one. This can't be, given how central this issue is to our policy as a country, to our politics as a country, to the test that Trudeau has invited people hold him to. Like this thing's got to hold water. This has got to be like, it can't just be like, oh yeah, we put together a 70-page brochure and it's got some, colorful graphs and stuff. Like it's got to actually have some kind of plausible path. That's going to include, just as you're pointing out, David, some hard trade-offs. And like when it comes out in March, April, May, whenever it is, it's going to have to be an important document in a way that this government hasn't actually like put a lot behind these kinds of plans before. Like they put these plans out and whatever, and nobody really sort of holds them to account for it. They don't act like they're going to hold themselves to account for it. Well, this one's going to fucking matter, or at least it ought to.
But then it's going to have to be driven by the center, because this is not a government that's used to your point, putting out plans. That's not the psychology that they have sitting around the cabinet table. They've all learned different or bad habits, whatever you want to call it. And Trudeau also doesn't want to be in a position where, on page 70 of Guilbeault's extensive climate change plan, there's something anti-nuclear, and like, he's standing up at a presser, and then all of a sudden Heather Schofield or someone asks him a question about, well, your environment minister is saying X in his plan. Like this is such a big deal for the government. This has to be driven, if it's going to be done right and done by the way that Trudeau wants it to be done, it is going to have to be driven by the center.
This is their 95 budget. I think, like, isn't it? By their own definitions. Maybe it won't be presented that way. Maybe they won't characterize it that way. But when you take a look at the policy challenges that confront us and the regional tensions that confront us, and when you take a look at the fact that they say this is an existential threat and it is the essential top priority, not just for the government, but for this prime minister, this is the cause célèbre beyond all others, to find this reconciliation and make this reconciliation of energy and climate work. I mean, it's their 95 budget. This should be presumably the blueprint by which this government is judged.
100%.
Politicians, by the way, politicians, I think, are scared unwarrantedly of nuclear energy. They think it's unpopular. It isn't actually unpopular. 70% of Ontarians support the use of nuclear energy to provide electricity in Ontario.
But I think, David, it's to your point in terms of like what people, especially the boomers, remember in terms of, you know, the protests and people being the scare tactics that were used by people in Greenpeace and what have you. So that's why I think it's people think
not just Greenpeace. Don't you remember the way, like, they were going to deliver that file to Jack Lemmon, who was going to hand it to Michael Douglas and Jane Fonda, and then they chased that guy right off the road. I mean, you know,
sometimes
it was up to no good in the 70s, man.
Sometimes our age differences come out when we talk about
little China syndrome reference there for you.
I'm more of a Silkwood person myself. But anyway, we got only a few minutes left. And this past week, Francois Legault, Quebec Premier Francois Legault, got under Jenny's and my skin at least. I don't know where you stand on this, Scott. But Jenny, his proposed levy on people that were unvaccinated to cover their share of that healthcare system costs felt to me like a real bridge too far.
Yeah, well, it's the complete opposite of universal healthcare, like we talked about. So, like, we as Canadians, we have to, like, if we all say there, we love our healthcare, we think it's great, and I'm not even we've all talked about the actual healthcare delivery in Canada. So this isn't where I'm going. I think it's just I agree with you. I think it's a bridge too far in terms of treatment. As I've said before, we all know and love people that are unvaccinated. We have a very high vaccination rate in Canada, and I think that this is, like, I know a lot of people, David, that I saw on Twitter that were saying, well, there's sin taxes on alcohol and there's sin taxes on tobacco, and it's like, okay, well, there's not sin taxes on people that OD from fentanyl or cocaine or other drugs that they use, and when they go to
Jenny,
hospital,
I expect the fucking healthcare system to treat my gout. Okay, when I have gout, when I have an outbreak of gout, I expect to get help for that. Now, what causes gout? Every shitty lifestyle choice you can possibly imagine is what causes gout.
Jesus, in the
Henry VIII, drinking red wine and eating turkey.
In the conservative party, we had a gout caucus, for God's sakes. Like,
well, let's put a pin on that and come back to it in a little bit, because I think there may be more to that story. Here's the thing I really dislike about it. Okay, so I'm with you guys. I'm against it. And as you know, I'm pretty hard ass on this. I've lost friends over whether or not they're going to get vaccinated. And, you know, they're kind of bullshit about, well, I'm not really against it. I'm just sort of hesitant, blah, blah, blah. I'm a hard ass on this. But I'm a hard ass on it in the terms of saying, listen, if you choose not to get vaccinated and you make that decision for yourself and for everyone else around you or for everyone else with whom you might come in contact, then you're going to have to pay the penalty of living under a more restricted world. You're going to have to find that people are not going to let you come into their places of work, worship, their homes, all that kind of stuff. But when you start saying, I'm going to tax those people, then you're telling those people it is a barrier to accessing health. You're saying to those people, well, then don't confess that you're not vaccinated. Therefore, when I'm not feeling well, I will refuse to go to the hospital. I will refuse to go to seek care. And then you are undermining the fundamental promise of universal healthcare. So I don't like it. I think it's a wrong way to go. I think the comparison to sin taxes is incorrect. It's not the same thing, because I can buy a bottle of booze, but that doesn't prohibit me from accessing and pay more for it. That doesn't prohibit me from accessing healthcare. I think this will discourage people from accessing a system that is and ought to be there for them when they are in need. But there's something else, man. And we keep coming back to it. Bill 21, this. We've got a premier who's flush with public opinion support. And I know it's receded a little bit as he's had to do these lockdown measures, and some people make a link to that. But I think this is a guy who feels unrivaled and unchallenged. I think this is a guy who feels like he can make choices that he doesn't pay a consequence for. And this is the kind of thing you get when people feel uncontested. And we all tiptoe around Quebec, and we tiptoe around Legault because he seems so powerful, particularly with Francophone voters. But at some point, somebody's got to step up on some of these questions and say, dude, you're wrong. And just because you are flush with Francophone votes and you are popular doesn't make every choice you make popular. There are some things that are wrong, even when the majority of opinion is supportive of it. And I just feel like people are scared shitless of this guy. And at some point, we got to stop giving him rope.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree too. Although ideally, it would be something in the provincial wing of politics in Quebec that would start to take him on intellectually. There's no intellectual challenge to him of any kind, and I know that we'd like the feds to do it, but it really isn't the right dynamic to have a
It sets it up.
federal government, provincial government fight about this. It needs to come organically within the province.
Agreed.
Oh.
Okay, so we don't have time to get Omar, Minister Alghabra. We don't have time to get to the vaccine truckers today. Fun as that conversation would have been. So you got a week off, Minister. But since we talk about cost of living every week, and since those things are related, we'll probably get back to that. But we've reached the end of our time, which Gordon Pinsent needs to get to bed, back for a nap. And so he's anxious to assemble everybody for the Hey Yous.
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The Hey Yous are about to begin.
All right, who wants to start?
Well, I can go.
Go, great.
So today there was another article about how much McKinsey gets paid by this Liberal government, and the fact that Dominic Barton used to basically have a revolving door into cabinet committee meetings when he was the head of McKinsey before he was appointed to his job in Australia or in China, which then got his a job at Rio Tinto. But the federal Liberal government basically has paid $34 million to McKinsey and consulting services. This is, of course, a government that said that they were going to cut outside consulting services in government and rose them by, I think, 40% in the first year. We essentially paid almost no money to McKinsey in our later years.
I saw a chart. The Harper government was not nearly as impressed with McKinsey as this government is apparently.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that there is some real there'll be some fire to the smoke if the opposition parties take this on. So it's not just a hey you to Conservatives to go after Dominic Barton, and it's not just it's to the NDP. It's all of them. There is something to this in terms of these contracts regarding the Phoenix pay system and what have you. And so if I was the opposition, I would be asking serious questions in terms of what the government's relationship with McKinsey and Dominic Barton, what it actually entails.
Interesting. Scott?
Remember that time, David, when we were going through the hydro thing with Premier Wynne, and there was a big headline, somebody had done an access to information. I think Deloitte had gotten something like $6.8 million in advisory fees and all this kind of stuff. But buried within there was like, I think 20 grand for me and Feschuk, because we were working on the task force doing comm support. Of course, I'm the one, though, that gets highlighted in the front page of the newspaper, right? Like as though so there's like a $7 million headline, and it's like, Scott Reid. And then so I wandered into a cabinet meeting and the premier turns and she goes, oh, there's my $7 million communications advisor. And I'm like, God damn it. You of all people know that's not true. These fucking management consultants suck money up like vacuums. So I maybe bear some bruises. All governments, but obviously the feds do. Like this government by management consultant, there's a lot of that going on these days, man. There's a lot of that going on federally and provincially. My hey you is to all the Ford haters. Okay. Now, David once went on television and called Doug Ford a dick, a bit of a dick, right? So he's not a big fan of Doug Ford's. He made CRTC history by then getting approval for that phraseology and is now endorsed. And you can, in fact, use it on television anytime you wish in the way that David did also. And I've
even in the daytime.
In the daytime. I've obviously been critical of Doug Ford and all this. But yesterday, Doug Ford's out there shoveling snow and digging people out. And he's like, hey, folks, I'm just out here in my 4x4 trying to, I got the jumper cables and the chains out and I'm helping folks go. And there's a lot.
I'm going to hate you right now.
A lot of people out there, and I made fun of them. I made lots of jokes on Twitter about it too. But there's a lot of folks out there like kind of going, yeah, and he should be at Queen's Park doing all this. That's all true. Okay. It's all bullshit. It's all put on. It's all crap. Okay. Don't feed the beast. Okay. There's no point in thinking that you've got a valid critique by screaming at Doug Ford that he's full of shit. And he ought not to be in the 4x4. Of course he ought not to be. Of course it's all for show. Of course it's bullshit. But like, don't energize the other side with a criticism. Get back to schools. Talk about that. Focus on where the guy's vulnerable, and he's plenty vulnerable. He's polling at 30% approval. That means 70% don't approve of him. Don't give the guy the opportunity to fight on the strongest ground where he looks like he's, winching people out of the thing in snowbanks and so forth. Don't fight that fight. That's his fight.
Because none of us think that Stephen Del Duca would be like in a snowbank winching someone out.
That's not the fucking test of whether or not you're a good premier. And my point is,
I'm agreeing with you.
I'm right now.
I'm agreeing with you.
No, you're not.
I am actually agreeing with you.
She is. She's saying, of course, Del Duca would exactly, if he was driving by. Now, whether Del Duca would drive around town looking for people to pull out of a snowbank, I don't know. But if Del Duca drove by somebody in a snowbank, he would help them.
He's bugging kind of person. Hey, are you stuck? No, I'm just at a red light. Here, let me help out. Here's some hot shots. Put these in your gloves. I'm the premier.
All right. My hey you goes out to the political leadership of Canada. You're failing right now terribly. This country is confused, anxious, absent direction about COVID. Nobody knows what the plan is. Nobody knows what's working and what isn't working. Nobody knows what next month will bring. And the leadership of the country has gone completely silent. Gone are the days when they're anxious to get up in front of cameras and microphones and tell us about what they're doing and thinking and how things are going to unfold. Nobody wants to do that anymore. You can't get tested. You can't get anything. And everybody's just sitting around wondering what the fuck is happening. And people should stand up and start to tell us what the fuck is happening. That's my hey you for the week.
I got plenty of people tell me what. No school, no Canada Post, no snow removal. I feel like I'm being informed all the time. I just don't like the things that.
All right, guys, this was fun. Great talking with you again this week. I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, TELUS, and our sponsor, CN Rail, for their support of this podcast. And, of course, all you accursed out there for listening. We'll be back next week with more entertaining banter about politics. See you then.